Host, Christene Marie. Thank you so much for joining me here tonight on this Sunday evening. We are going to be talking about our choice in the matter when it comes to the best and most optimal yes we can give for ourselves, for our life, for frankly, a lot of choices that we make, we don't really realize just how much power you and I have. It's easy to live life as a victim, and I am sitting here actually it's kind of like a bed and breakfast, but technically it's an Airbnb. My whole family is gathered celebrating Christmas, and I'm just 10 minutes down the way, and I'm excited. I just got back from our first evening together, and there's something really special about our family all being present. Um, and I say all, but there's a couple people missing from the table now at this point. It's interesting over the years, and I wasn't intending to go here, but I will for the sake of being authentic. Um, you know, Over the years we've lost some folks along the ways, and some of them left by their own decision and their own accord. Um, and others were just literally tragically lost. And I think that there's something about the losing of someone that actually is a really important frame for this conversation of what's the best yes we can possibly make when time is short. And we just don't know how much time we have. We don't know how long our life is going to be. My brother-in-law was the most vivacious and effervescent person I have ever met. He was 26 years old, applying for Harvard, just had the biggest dreams. He was serving on boards for nonprofits, just had such an incredible desire to make an impact, such an incredible life trajectory that he was on. And he was killed by a drunk driver on a head-on collision at 26. His baby girl, 3 weeks old. And so there's something about this whole question of how to choose the best yes that actually is really, really important for us to consider, especially as we're heading into the new year. We've been talking over the last week around what are habits that we need to instill. Just the other day, we were talking about how to intentionally choose hard things, how to live with our eyes wide open versus almost like living asleep. And I know that I lived this way. I felt like I lived literally on autopilot. I lived asleep up until just a couple years ago, when I really started to activate the different intelligences that you and I possess. From grade school, we're taught how to activate the intellectual intelligence, how to engage our mind, how to think logically, how to think critically, how to literally make cognitive decisions. And we're not taught how to engage the other parts of us. For a lot of us, we're not taught how to engage emotionally and logically. It's either one or the other, and we're not taught to place equal value on these both parts of us that collectively make the whole. And so, because of that, we've placed disproportionate value on one or the other. And we really haven't honored the other part of us that is just as real, just as vibrant, just as alive. And so, for so long as that part of us is not honored, does not get a voice, does not get a seat at the table, it starts to go to sleep. It starts to slowly numb its senses and its ability to perceive, but then also its ability to speak to us. And so, after a decade of living with my emotions turned off, my intuition stopped speaking. It's almost like a form of disrespect. Once we stop listening to a part of us, it's actually disrespectful for it to keep talking and trying to offer its opinion, its data. And otherwise, it's kind of just like you and me. Man, why would we continue to talk to somebody, sharing our opinion, sharing what we know to be true based on our experience, and they're continuously disregarding us? Well, we're just going to stop sharing it. And so, just like that, emotions store data, our logic remembers and recalls data, our physical body stores data. And so when it comes to the experience for both of us when we're engaging in life as we know it, if we're shutting off a part of our body, the right hemisphere of our brain stores our emotions. And if we're shutting that off, we're actually shutting off a significant percentage of the human experience and our human body. And so, if we're to turn it back online and almost like reactivate it, it's really, really important because what happens on the other side of that is the ability to then choose a yes and also make a no, make these decisions based on and informed by um, literal intelligence, emotionally and intellectually. And so on the Knowing Show, there's a couple different intelligences that we talk about, obviously the intellectual and emotional, but also the spiritual intelligence. I think of it as the spirit is effectively the pathway to the divine, the pathway to God. God has something to say to every single one of us. And so if we're shutting off our emotions or we're shutting off our spirit or we're shutting off our mind, we're shutting off our access to different elements of life and different elements of ourselves that is so important for us to cultivate. Because if we want to live fully and wholly and alive, I think of my 26-year-old brother who was killed, and I'm like, my gosh, 26 old. That for me, that was 6 years ago. And I've lived so much of life since then. And it's just so devastating when I think about all the people who are lost at such a young age. There's a song by Billy Joel that says, "The good die young." And it just feels like it's always that way. And so for you and me who are living longer than the man who who died at 26 years old and was just such a wonderful human and had a 3-week-old baby girl. How then do we live? How then do we live so that our life is worthy of the time that we're given when so many other people are not given that amount of time? And so this is the conversation that we're having tonight. How do we live a life worthy of the time afforded to us that so many others don't? And so I just want to take a quick moment and say hello to some folks who are joining me on YouTube. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight, Stevie. Um, and Rob, thank you so much for joining. It's so interesting. I'm reading just some of the comments here. Um, I think it's really, really interesting for every single one of us to consider, what are some of the almost elements around some of the things we're learning today around specifically emotional intelligence. We weren't raised how to do relationships. We weren't taught how to engage with each other in a way that is healthy. I've had to learn the hard way in so many areas of life. Um, Specifically as it pertains to relationships. We were taught the ABCs, we were taught mathematics, we were taught different different elements on the IQ, but we weren't taught areas on the EQ that will facilitate healthy dynamics. And for so many of us, as a result of that, we're trying to effectively heal in certain ways from things that we were taught when we were kids. And so where's their misalignment? Where and how does the past show up today in the present to inform the way that we're engaging with the world that frankly, if we were to really truly choose, we wouldn't choose to show up the way that we do today. We wouldn't choose to make the decision that we do today. But because we are programmed in a certain way, it's default, it's autopilot. It's almost like well, of course I'm going to be engaging in this way because this is how I was raised to do so. And so when it comes to choosing a yes that is different than how we were raised, sometimes it's actually really, really necessary for us to first go back and analyze, do an audit of, well, what was the past? Because for so much of the time, it's really, really automated. It's literally these default behaviors that we don't even think about. It's actually subconscious. We're not conscious about the decisions we're making because they're so habitual. And so, if we really want to choose a yes that's better than what we know as our programming, then we need to go back and just revisit, okay, well, what's the program that was given to me? And some of those programs we actually want to keep, but we want to keep them with intention and with conscious decision for the purpose of where do I actually want to get to? And again, talking about kind of living on autopilot and living on habit and living on default. I know my sisters and I talk about this a lot. It's, well, what am I called to do? we were talking last night about the beauty that is the whole human soul set on fire. Man, when they know why they're here, when they know what they're called to do, when they know exactly the reason why they're going to spend the rest of their life dedicated in pursuit of something that is for a greater good and for a greater purpose outside of themselves. There's a book by David Brooks called The Second Mountain, and it's really about the element of, okay, for the first half of our life we spend on the first mountain. We're focused on our career, we're focused on ourselves, we're really focused on the cultivation and betterment of ourselves. But then we come to a certain point in our lives where we have this choice. Am I going to continue to live my life fixated on you and me, or am I going to really live for the good of the community? Am I going to live for the good and betterment of those around me? And that's the second mountain. And once we start summiting that second mountain, all of a sudden our goalpost changes. I think of it as a bowling alley, and the pins that we have in the, I don't know what it's called, but in the bowling alley, the end destination are the bowling pins. And so when we think about what those pins represent, is the pathway and the pin themselves, were those given to us? Or are those by our own choosing? Have we actually intentionally chosen the bowling pins that we're aiming for, and also the alley which we're choosing to throw the pins in and move through the journey that is life to get to the place and the destination that we've set forth for ourselves? And so when I mentioned this earlier just a few minutes ago, man, I felt like I was asleep for so much of my life. I had been living so just kind of mind numb to the world because I was living in accordance with these preset programs and habits that were modeled for me, that I inherited, and I really was not conscious of why I was doing them in the first place. It was so on habit. And even, I mean, honestly, I saw it in my own life to such an extreme where my husband and I ended up separating a couple years ago, and as he, after he left, I was really analyzing, how did I end up here? How is it that my life is so, like, how is it that I'm just in this state of like such brokenness at the time? And what I saw was that he and I both, without meaning to, we both ended up existing in a marriage just like our parents. And it was because we never set a new target. We never actually, with intention, charted out a new course, put a new bowling pin in place of the old. And so instead, we ended up doing a 360, repeating history, rather than doing a 180 and actually seeing real change. So we have to first identify the past. What happened that I don't want to do? So what's the no? What do I not want? And then what is the new yes? What's the new choice? What's a new path? What's a new bowling pin? Because if we don't do that, we will always end up habituating what we know. So there's something about creating something new, because for a lot of us, y'all, I don't know about you, but I look around at marriages today, for example, and I'm like, man, there's not a lot of good ones that I see that are like what I'd want to model. And so there's an element there where it's like, okay, let me actually do an audit of what I don't want, but then also do an audit of what I do want, and handcraft and create, personalize the bowling pin, and put it in the alley of, okay, that's my new target. I want that. The amalgamation of picking this little piece and that little piece. Oh, look, I love what they're doing over here. Let me actually like build this model that I now can pursue and really seek. But we have to do both. We have to do an audit of the past and be creative around establishing something new. Because for so many of us, I think about, honestly, I'm thinking about my sisters in particular because I've been spending the last week with them. Each one of us, it's really been a challenge and also something really exciting about, okay, I need to create something new. I need to create my own path, a new path that we've never seen witnessed before. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like. And in that process of identifying the new bowling pin, but then also being willing to be curious about the pathway to get there, I mean, I feel like that's where the magic happens. It's when we remove and really be open-handed and let go. And actually, I was talking to someone at dinner this evening around that, of like, okay, how do we be so open-handed? And I got this kind of picture in my mind at the beginning of 2024. If I can literally like let go and be open-handed about my life, even that bowling pin, if I can even be open-handed about the bowling pin, much less so the path to get there. Well, now I'm not holding tightly and gripping tightly to the pathway to get there or what the outcome may look like because then if I've actually let go, man, it has now the potential to far exceed and outweigh anything I could have ever imagined, how good it could be. And that same principle of letting go and really allowing for creation to come. We can't create if we're closed-fisted, but that same principle of being open-handed extends into so many other areas of life, even forgiveness. If I am holding on tightly to the collars of the person that has done me wrong, man, I'm never gonna be free from them, and yes, there's a letting them go and forgiving them and letting them be and letting that like, literally almost like letting them, forgiveness in terms of releasing them from the debt that they owe, sure. Forgiveness in that regard, great. But if I'm not forgiving and I'm close-fisted, I'm keeping the past forever with me. It's, like, tethered to me because my hands are so tightly around their collar, around their neck, like, kind of pay me what you owe me, or even if I'm not even expecting it from them, for so long as I'm not forgiving, for so long as I'm taking them with me and dragging them with me and saying, "Look, you've done wrong. I'm just saying, you don't have to do anything, but just acknowledging the fact that you've done me wrong." For so long as we're carrying that with us, man, we are never free ourselves, much less so the other person. And so, if I really want to move freely into every new step, every new season, every new day of my life, I need to have this open handedness to the past so that as I step into the future, as I step into the next day, literally just the day, man, I'm able to do so with a curiosity and an openness to whatever may come my way because it could very well far exceed beyond all that I've imagined or dreamed of. And so there's this really interesting dynamic even now, and this is why I love conversations like this because there's just a lot of exploration. So this concept of being so open-handed and also being so crystal clear and keeping the eye on the ball and knowing exactly what I want. So frankly, that's the dynamic that I'm trying to figure out right now of how do I do both? How do I let go and be open-handed and not drag the past along with me? And maybe that's actually what it is that we're open-handed to what the process looks like, what the outcome may look like, open-handed to the past and letting it go. And also, being so crystal clear, perhaps it's even like who I am. This is interesting. We talked yesterday about how our inner self and our outer life, there's a very real difference when we're setting goals. Yes, we can set tangible external goals, but okay, well, who am I being in the process of my doing, in the pursuit of these external goals that I'm setting? So perhaps it's actually, this is so interesting. I wonder if so much of it is rather we're actually really open handed on the doing part, and the being is man, like I am committed to truth and I am committed to vulnerability, even. And I'm committed to the cultivation of my IQ and EQ and spiritual intelligence and knowing God and knowing myself and knowing others and love. And, that's maybe actually what it means to really marry together the passion and the commitment to who I want to be in the pursuit of where I'm going. And who I am perhaps is actually the very thing that we get almost like convicted around, I was talking to someone actually the other week on the Knowing Show, and we were talking about kind of that this dichotomy of being so, um, pursuing peace and almost like being at rest and contented with ourselves and knowing our worth and not becoming complacent. That's a dichotomy in and of itself. So it's internally, I know my worth. Internally, I know who I am. Internally, I am secure and known and loved and chosen, etc. And externally, man, I have a fire under me and I'm going to make the impact, do the thing, etc., etc. So It's really interesting. I think it goes both ways, and I'm curious to hear your perspective on that regard. How much of the dichotomy of allowing the and that was actually a big shift for me, a couple years ago. My therapist said, "You need to change the conjunction of but to and." So, specifically in the context we were talking about, and for so many of us, it's, "I feel this way, and" I'm going to make this action. And so in so many ways, there's usually a conflict, the inner conflict of I'm experiencing this emotion, and this is where the and is really, really important when it comes to the tying together of the IQ and EQ. The and is allowing for both to coexist and both to be true. So maybe it is the open-handedness and also the fervent pursuit over that which I feel called to and that which honestly excites me. And each one of my sisters, each one of us has something that really gets us excited and gets us going and gets us motivated and up out of bed in the mornings. And man, are those the people that I want to spend my time with. And man, do I wanna be peaceful and have almost like this inner life of so much peace, so much ability to just rest and know that in one sense, it's all I just trust that what's gonna happen is gonna be for me at the end of the day, at all times. This is for me, and having a narrative like that is so incredibly important because then when shit hits the fan, do I have something greater than my actions to fall back on, and it's predicated in who I am? So really it's that tug of war, it's both, and, I just saw on Instagram you said, "I specifically did that this week in a conflict moment." I love that because that's such a good lesson for me of, man, maintaining the confidence and the ability to know who we are, and also maintaining clarity and conviction over where we feel called to go. Because if we don't know both the being, clarity over who we are, and clarity over the doing, what I think and where I'm headed, but I'm really open to being wrong and not even wrong, but I'm open to it changing. I'm open to it evolving. I had this thought like a month ago. Or no, it was a little bit longer than that. I had this thought about how on a daily basis, it's like Winston Churchill going into the cellar almost like underground and just like looking at the war plans. And on a daily basis, it's like, okay, how have plans changed? Because other people are making different decisions. And so my yes back a month ago or a week ago or yesterday could actually alter because of someone else's decision, someone else's choice. And so there's this element of, okay, what are the non-changeables in my life over who I am? And also my relationships with other people. That's another point that's really important as well. There's been so much, thank God for this in one sense, so much cultivation of emotions where it's, okay, how do I feel? How am I engaging with the world? What other people think, et cetera, et cetera. And that's really dangerous if it's not very well balanced and countered with the truth. So, in relationships, for example, man, if we have a really strong emotion or a really strong feeling, it can feel louder and frankly sound louder than the truth of what's has a lot of data backed to it. This is why all of our intelligences need to be, I like to think of it as every single intelligence coming into the boardroom, each one having a seat at the table. Our intellectual intelligence that has data and has memory stored about people, places, times, experiences, emotional intelligence, which has data stored as well. And then our spiritual intelligence. What do I know to be true? Who does God say that I am? And having the truth so grounded. It's like a this is so funny. It's like a tent and each intelligence is a peg in the ground. I just saw Craig, you said solitude is where much of my growth comes from in order to get clarity, due to clarity. I love that. I have found the exact same thing. If I am spending time on a regular basis to be alone, to get quiet, that is when I get the best clarity. And it's both clarity around the EQ, but then also the IQ and everything between personal life and professional life. What what is clear? What is like this is so fun. It's like It's like there's a mystery to be found in so many ways when it comes to both our personal selves and also our professional lives. There's really this is where I love the pursuit of spiritual intelligence because every single one of us has a a reflection of God and Christ in us, and so therefore, I believe this so strongly to my core that every single one of us has a revelation around God that is unique. Solely, no one else will ever know except for you and me. And so because we have this little mystery inside us, man, it's so important that we create. And in creation is frankly vulnerability because we haven't arrived yet. We're in the process of creating, we're in the process of making something, we're in the process of revealing, and the process of revelation is uncertain. We don't know what's going to be on the other side of uncertainty. It's not known. And so we have to be willing to exist in the discomfort of uncertainty and in the process of not knowing, which is the irony, given that it's a knowing show. And so in order for us to get to that point, it's like that space. So Viktor Frankl, author of Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote this in a German concentration camp. He says, in between stimulus and response is choice. It's just like the space of time we choose. We choose our yes, we choose our no, we choose our values, we choose how we're going to be for the rest of our lives. And when I think about why we're doing this knowing show in the first place, so much of it hinges on legacy. You and I are building our legacy every single moment, every single day. And so when we think about at the end of our life, who do we want to be? When we look back, well, what are the decisions we're making every single day, right now, right here? If you're tuning in right now, do you want to be here? Is this a good use of your time? Is this a good use of my time? Tomorrow, how are we going to wake up? You said, Craig, your mornings are so important. I feel the same way. So, am I going to honor my morning tomorrow? Am I actually going to take the time to invest to gain the clarity so that my day, that the rest of the 10, 12, 14 hours waking is spent with intention and rooted in the truth of every single intelligence, just like a tent being pegged, each one is a corner in the ground, each one is activated online, coming into the boardroom, offering the intelligence that it has. But I'm giving myself and you're giving yourself space to make decisions predicated in truth and also aware fully of the data that every single intelligence is offering us. And so with that question, I think it's really, really important for each one of us to really analyze, well, what do I even want in the first place? Because if we don't know what we want, we actually cannot fundamentally choose a yes that's in alignment with that. And, in that space, between stimulus and response is choice. We each have a choice. None of us are a victim. I was just looking here in the chats here on YouTube and a few other places. So I just wanted to just make a quick comment, look at the comments here for a few minutes. Um, Hi, Craig. Thank you so much for your comment here. You said I learned to live in the moment to relive myself or to relieve myself of anxiety, which includes uncertainty. I'm so glad you brought this up. There really is something about existing in the present moment that really allows for us to be free of the anxiety that often accompanies um, frankly, thinking of the future. Because if we haven't resolved the past, we're projecting the past onto the future. And so, of course, we're going to feel anxious about tomorrow because we're anxious about the past because we haven't resolved it. So, Craig, to your point, learning how to live in the moment, actually being present in the moment is actually such a solve. So it's like, oh my gosh, it's such a relief. It's like a sigh, literally of relief to the constant string of anxiety. Someone was talking to me about this the other week. They were like, how do I get away from living in my mind and having my mind bombard me where they just aren't free? They literally do not feel free to not have their mind come in and ruin the present moment. And so I'm so grateful you brought up presence because that's been a habit that frankly was not easy for me. And even this whole process of being versus doing when we're talking about cultivating our inner life in addition to our outer life, like these words meant nothing to me a couple years ago. But the process of being and the state of being, what I actually learned how to be by my dog. And my therapist told me years ago, he was like, "I think you need to learn being." And I, like, pulled out my notebook and I was like, "Okay, can you give me a couple examples or ways of how to be?" And he was like, "You don't get it." And what I learned from literally my dog, like, the next couple of days was that the more that I actually was truly present in the moment, not thinking about even 5, 10 minutes from now, not thinking about yesterday, but just truly being here and now. Man, I was taking my dog for a walk when I really experienced being present for the first time. It was like all of a sudden, I noticed the shapes of the clouds. All of a sudden, I noticed the color of the sky. All of a sudden, I heard the snow crunch under my boots. And as I started existing in the present moment, man, it was like the world became alive. I felt like each moment I was alive, I woke up from those predisposed autopilot behaviors where we wake up, we check our phone and just man, even that practice alone, immediately we're getting told how to be, how to live, what other people's opinions are, and we never take a moment to check in with ourselves. How are we actually doing? How, like literally, how am I feeling right here in this moment? And not even how am I feeling, but just let me just wake up and come out of my subconscious stupor that I was just in. I just spent the night sleeping. Let me not feed myself with the external voices first thing. Y'all, we are losing our sense of self for so long as we are looking external for fulfillment, for satisfaction, for joy, for peace. Anytime, and this was a big warning sign for me, anytime that I started feeling pain, and I reached for my phone, that was like a big red flag. Like, do not engage. If I'm actually feeling pain or missing my former husband or feeling upset at what somebody did, that's my warning sign to not pick up my phone, but instead literally sit with the discomfort, whether it's in my stomach or my chest tightening or the lump in my throat, whatever it is, I need to sit with that physical sensation because that physical sensation of discomfort is showing me that there's something deeper here that I need to pay attention to. And usually that's the past showing up in the present and kind of messing up whatever I'm experiencing now. And the more that it's the cultivation of that habit of, okay, what am I feeling? What am I sensing? Why is that there? And then we get to choose. But we have to be conscious first. That's why the very, very first step of the definition of emotional intelligence is to become aware of one's emotions. And then you get into the process of, okay, step number 2 is understanding your emotions, and then step number 3 is conveying your emotions. But first, you have to be aware of. So if we want to be emotionally intelligent, intelligent is attached to that word emotional for a reason. It's not just being emotional. It's being intelligent. It's about being wise and privy to what is going on. Just like how the intelligence of the mind really lends to so many elements that we learn in school, being intelligent to our emotions ensures that we're in control of our emotions. We sit down and decide and choose, I'm going to do the ABCs and count through the 26 letters of the alphabet for you. I've learned it, I've memorized it, and I know it by heart, and I'm going to share it with you now with intention, with choice. And so if we want to choose our emotional state, we can do that as well. But we have to come to understand it and become aware of it first. So just being aware of the sensations that indicate emotions is first and step number 1. And then we kind of go to step number 2, which is okay, well, why am I feeling that way? To begin with. But first we have to sense and know, okay, this is what's coming up for me and my body. Um, I just saw Simwari, I think that's how you say your name. You said 99% of Christians are fake, and Christians, man, there's something around Christianity that, given that today is Sunday and we talk about spiritual intelligence on Sundays, I just wanted to address your note. Christianity is, religion in general is one that it's brought so much pain for so many of us in so many different ways. And for me, actually, the church, the Christian church was the furthest place I wanted to go when I was most broken and probably needed church the most. You know, when I it was like when I lost everything, that was the place that felt the most unsafe, and I think that that's exactly, uh, what's wrong, you know? So I appreciate you making that comment because I think that it's really important that we first again, just like how it's be aware of your emotions. It's like be aware of the problem. You know, that's the first step, and then move into understanding it, and then move into okay, now let's actually solve for this and take control. You know, okay, being aware of my emotion is not the end. I actually need to make the choice to inform with conscious intent what my response is going to be. So, frankly, if there's been a lot happening in the church and there's a lot happening on the religious front that's causing real pain, I actually need to first start with the awareness of that and the reality of what the impact is for me. Because so often when we're triggered by something, usually there's pain associated with it. And so I've actually really had to dive into my own pain and hang up and the impact of the church on me specifically. And we'll do a show about that at some point. But I just wanted to acknowledge and I guess I really feel that. And there have been times where even still today, I don't feel comfortable saying like assigning any religion to it because I think so much of religion is misplaced attention and misplaced understanding and pursuit, even where we actually are looking still, even in religion, we're looking externally rather than recognizing that Christ is in all. Christ is in you and me. God literally is in every single one of us, and we therefore have power to live in a way that makes an impact and causes healing and causes love. And we get to live like how Jesus lived. That's why we study the 5 habits of Christ leading up to Christmas, because Jesus was the physical manifestation of Christ. And if so, let me learn how Jesus lived because he said, it's better for you to go away and or it's better for me to go away. So it's like, okay, well, if it's better for Jesus to live or leave, why is that? How am I then supposed to live so that it's better that he's gone? I must have a lot of power that I've got access to that I have no idea about. And so for that reason, man, this is just it's so important because religion has done so much damage and caused so much pain. And still, this is where and is really important. You know, we talked about this earlier, not just saying but all the time and throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but saying, okay, this has caused me pain and what's also the truth. And it's pulling out, like searching for the truth, man, with the fine tooth comb, like let me not lose the gems and the diamonds and the precious gemstones of truth while there's a lot of pain mixed in there. I I have really wanted to change a lot of me and change a lot in relation to just different mindsets that I had growing up, specifically from the church. But what's really easy to do in that process is to throw out everything and hate everything. And frankly, you know, it's like destroying every part of our life rather than saying, having the and. I don't like this, and I choose to honor the truth that was given here, even though it was misapplied. And so recognizing the misapplied truth is really, really critical. Um, I'm just taking a look here at the chat here. Hi, Adam. Thank you for joining tonight. Thank you, Phil. I love that you said or Bill Cosby. I love that. Um, Delisha, I just saw your comment here, or Delish, you said learning to forgive yourself because you can only do what you knew how to do at the time and move on. Oh gosh, I'm so grateful you brought this up. Oh my gosh, this is so important. Learning how to forgive yourself, and that's something I think. Delish, I don't know I'll ever be perfect at that. My gosh, I'm so grateful you said that because really, we do so much of us, so many of us, we do the best we know how. And my gosh, I'm just so grateful you said that. You know, we really, for so many of us, we really do the best we can. And so I just feel like that's just the most beautiful way to end tonight. As we're looking and trying to choose our best yes, as we're trying to undo programs and trying to maintain the truth with it all, um, man, there's so much grace and so much compassion for the sake of, not even for the sake of, but man, we just, I don't know, there's just so much love there, and I'm really glad, Dalish. Thank you so much for bringing that up because I think actually for so long as talking about being curious, for so long as there's judgment towards ourselves, I actually don't think we can really have real change, like systemic change, like at the root. I don't know about y'all, but I have never been able to produce sustainable change in myself for so long as it's powered by fear or powered by judgment. But man, if it's really powered by, and I mean real love, not just like the love yourself and don't try hard at anything. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the love that sees the light and the darkness. And and the light that is like God, where it's unchangeable and consistent and constant. And so, man, did we and I hope this for you, but I think for the most part, so many of us are actually doing genuinely the best we know how. And for many of us, it was modeled for us, we inherited it. And so it's like, okay, if we want to choose something new, hold on to the truth. And also just man gives so much grace, and that's an ever present lesson for me. And so, Delish, thank you so much for bringing that up because it is really true. Like, I actually, perfection was the way that I aimed and focused, and per- it was my bowling pin, going back to that example of the bowling pins that we have in our alley that we're pursuing. Who set the bowling pins there in the first place? And for me, it was the bowling pin of perfection that really was the hallmark of whether I was heading in the right direction or not. Did I make other people happy? Did other people like me? Were other people literally in a good mood? If someone in my family got in a bad mood, even when I was under 10 years old, if somebody was unhappy, it was my fault. And I just felt this pressure to keep everyone happy. Their emotions were a reflection of myself and how I was doing. And so it was just really dangerous, like emotionally unsafe for everybody, because that's a lot of pressure for me as a, you know, 7-year-old to handle, and a lot of pressure for them. God forbid they have a bad day, and then I take it upon myself to fix it. And just again, with the whole concept of letting go, let go, let them have a bad day, and afford so much grace, because I think for so many of us, and I hope this is true, I know it's not completely true, but I think for so many of us, we're genuinely doing the best we know how. I just remember walking up one day to a ticket agent. I was flying, uh, I was taking a flight, and I just walked up to her and I asked her a question. She was clearly not having a good day, but because of her reaction to me, I just immediately was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like I felt it emotionally. I felt the energy of her angst or upset or whatever. And so, in the process of letting go and really releasing people, we also release ourselves and give ourselves so much freedom to maintain our own baseline of emotional. I like thinking of the word, emotional energy or frequency only because I read David Hawkins, and he talks about this in a way that makes sense to me. When I hear people say emotional frequency, I feel like I hear it and I'm like glazed over. I'm like, what do you even mean by that? But what he talks about is that emotions hold a numerical value. So the lower the emotion, by way of the more negative it gets, the lower the numerical value drops. So shame is the lowest emotional energy, and it's 50, but pride is 150, and then courage is 200. So it's almost like pride moves up to courage because it becomes more of a positive thing where it's not ego focused. And then you move up to peace, which is 400 or 600. I don't remember all of them, but like you move up in emotional energy. And y'all, we feel that from other people. When someone is coming up to us and their shoulders are slumped and they're not really looking us in the eye, and they feel off and they're in shame, there's an emotional energy tied to that versus somebody else comes up to you with their shoulders rolled back and they're like, "Hey, it's good to see you. I'm so glad you're here." That is a very different emotional energy than you're going to experience with somebody in shame. And so, of course, when somebody is coming up to us in a lower emotional energy, we feel that. And so the question becomes, am I actually able to choose my own emotional energy? Or am I so at the behest and like inconsistency of because of everybody else and because my emotional state is tied intrinsically to them? And that's when I learned I was very codependent. And so we can talk about codependency maybe tomorrow. But for now, I'm really grateful that you brought that up, Delish, because I know, oh my gosh, I know that just giving ourselves so much grace as we're in the process of growing, as we're in the process of leveling up emotionally and choosing joy and choosing what the yes looks like that best represents the type of life that we want to live. How do we actually move in the direction towards the bowling pins that we've intentionally set for ourselves in a way that, man, keeps us safe, in a way that allows for us to maintain the truth while also disregarding things that we don't want to keep with us. And I'm really glad you said that because with compassion, man, so much is possible. And compassion is empathy in action. You know, we feel the pain of whatever it is maybe that we're letting go of, yet we're taking real steps and taking real action on behalf of ourselves, you know? And so it's not just sitting and wallowing, but it's really feeling the emotion and the pain of what we're letting go of, perhaps, but then moving forward and taking real action as a result. Um, Mm. I see a couple more chats here. Y'all, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm sorry that I need to jump off. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you all coming and chatting with me tonight. And I will be on here tomorrow. I probably will be on late again. I'm with my family for Christmas this week. We're celebrating a couple days late, and I think I'm going to do another midnight episode. So thank you all so much for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow on the Knowing Show.